Welcome back to the deep dive. You wanted to get a better look at Hitler's table talks,
Right.
these infamous dinner conversations that people always say reveal his inner thoughts.
Uh-huh.
Well, we've got the research you sent us, mostly from Michael Nilsson's Hitler Redux.
Yeah.
And this book really goes deep into how reliable.
But Nilsson's book,
Yeah.
it really brings up some serious questions about, are they even authentic?
hmm
It's a captivating story
Yeah.
about forgeries and conflicting accounts and the motivations of the
Mhm.
people that actually recorded these things.
So to get started, these table talks, they come from notes taken during dinners
Yeah.
and these late-night chats with Hitler between 1941 and 1944.
That's right.
Is that right?
Yeah. And several people said they documented these conversations.
Okay.
Two key figures are Heinrich Heim, who was a really devoted member of the SS,
Yeah.
and Henry Picker,
Mhm.
who was an official stenographer for the Nazi Party.
But Nilsson's research suggests that their accounts might not be as reliable as they
Yes,
seem.
Precisely,
Love
yeah.
this stuff.
The whole idea of writing these conversations down
Okay.
supposedly started with Martin Bormann,
Okay.
who was Hitler's fiercely loyal secretary.
Yeah.
He was the one who controlled access to the Führer,
Right.
Bormann. He saw himself as the guardian of Hitler's legacy,
hmm
and he wanted to capture every word
Yeah.
for posterity.
So he had this idea to start.
So he's the one who instructed Heim to take notes.
Okay.
But Heim later claimed that Hitler wasn't aware that he was doing this.
Oh, wow.
But Picker, on the other hand, initially stated that Hitler did know about the note-taking,
It's okay.
but he later changed his story.
So right from the beginning, we have these conflicting accounts
Yeah, right from the start.
and potential hidden agendas.
Right. Conflicting accounts right from the beginning.
Yeah, that certainly throws a wrench into things.
It does.
And it gets even more complicated when these notes are published after the war.
Oh, absolutely.
Can you walk us through that?
Yeah. So Picker published his version of the table talks first.
Okay.
That was called Tischgespräche.
Okay.
Then a guy named Francois Genoud shows up,
Okay.
and he says that he has Bormann's original notes.
Wow.
So he publishes his own compilation called Libre Propos.
Okay.
The problem is their versions are different.
Oh, really?
Yeah, very different, and it sparked lawsuits and accusations of forgery.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Sounds like a historical mystery waiting to be unraveled.
Yeah.
So if we're already seeing these inconsistencies,
Yeah.
what are some of the specific reasons
Sure.
that Nilsson doubts the accuracy?
So one key issue is stenography,
Okay.
or rather, the lack thereof.
Hmm.
Both Heim and Picker initially said they used shorthand
Oh.
to record the conversations,
Uh-huh.
but there's evidence suggesting that neither of them were very proficient
Oh, wow.
in shorthand at all.
Okay.
Heim even admitted that he relied heavily on his memory,
Okay.
and he was just summarizing hours of conversation
Oh.
into just a few pages.
Wow.
Imagine trying to remember everything that was said at a dinner party,
Yeah.
let alone one with Hitler.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. It seems almost impossible to accurately capture the nuances
does.
and all the details of a conversation
Yeah.
based purely on memory,
Especially in that environment.
especially given
Surrounding Hitler.
the pressure cooker environment surrounding Hitler.
Exactly. It gets more complicated because Picker also admitted to making changes and
Oh.
omissions
Wow.
to the content.
Wow.
He said he did this to align with Bormann's agenda.
Wow. So right off the bat,
Yeah.
we're dealing with filtered and potentially manipulated accounts,
Yeah.
not verbatim transcripts as they were initially presented.
Mm-hmm.
It really raises the question of, are we getting a glimpse into Hitler's authentic
That's
thoughts?
a $1,000,000 question.
Or are we seeing a carefully constructed narrative
Yeah.
that was designed to serve a particular purpose?
Right.
Is this...
And Nilsson points to additional evidence
Mhm.
that supports this skepticism.
Okay.
He highlights these discrepancies between the content of the table talks
Mm-hmm.
and other sources that are more reliable,
Like what?
like Hitler's own writings and speeches.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Do you have a specific example of one
So-
of these discrepancies?
So in Mein Kampf, Hitler tells the specific story about his school years
Okay.
that clashes with a story he supposedly told at dinner in 1942.
All right.
So the table talks version involves a tale about Hitler's Czech classmates and their reactions to the Russo-Japanese War.
Okay.
The timeline doesn't quite add up, though.
Really?
The Russo-Japanese War ended in 1905, But Hitler wouldn't have had Czech classmates in his hometown of Linz until after that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So even like factual anecdotes
Mhm.
within the table talks
Yeah.
might be fabrications or misrememberings.
Right.
It really makes you question the overall reliability
It
of
does.
these sources.
Precisely.
And Nilsson doesn't stop there.
No, he doesn't.
He even found evidence suggesting that Genoud's version of the table talks
Uh-huh.
might have been edited based on Picker's earlier published work.
Exactly.
This further complicates matters
It does.
and raises questions about each author's agenda.
Exactly.
It sounds like Nilsson's research throws the authenticity of the
Yeah.
table talks into serious doubt.
It does.
But even if we acknowledge these issues with the sources,
Right.
can we still glean any valuable insights
I think so.
from them? Are
Yeah.
they completely useless?
Not entirely.
Okay.
They can still be valuable resources,
Yeah.
but only if we treat them cautiously.
Yeah,
And we always keep in mind their potential biases.
right.
So rather than taking them as verbatim transcripts of Hitler's thoughts,
Okay.
we should view them as filtered, potentially
that.
manipulated accounts
Uh-huh.
that are heavily influenced by the agendas of Heim and Picker,
Right.
and of course Bormann.
Okay, so I see what you mean.
Yeah.
So perhaps we should approach them with the same level of scrutiny
Mm-hmm.
as, say, like
Yeah.
reading a gossip magazine.
Mm-hmm.
We might find the content entertaining and even thought-provoking,
Right.
but we shouldn't necessarily accept everything as undisputed fact.
That's an excellent analogy.
Okay.
So Nilsson argues that we need to apply the same rigorous critical thinking to the table talks as we would to any other historical source.
Right.
We need to consider the context, the
Yeah.
motivations, and the potential biases that are at play.
Yeah.
Instead of seeking definitive answers, we should use them to raise further questions
Okay.
and explore the complexities of history.
I see. Okay, so we've established that these table talks,
Mhm.
they're not exactly the unbiased historical goldmine that
Yeah.
maybe they were once thought to be.
Yeah.
We have to approach them with a healthy dose of skepticism,
Right.
recognizing the potential for manipulation and distortion.
Mm-hmm.
This makes me wonder, are there any specific instances
Sure.
where the table talks
Yeah.
present an image of Hitler
Yeah.
that clashes with what we know
Uh,
from more reliable sources?
That's a great question, and it gets to the heart of why Nilsson's research is so important.
Right.
So we can't just dismiss the table talks outright.
Right.
We have to really carefully compare them to other evidence
Okay.
to see where the discrepancies lie
Mm-hmm.
and what those discrepancies might reveal about Hitler's character and motivations.
So it's a process of using these potentially flawed sources
Right.
to gain a deeper understanding
Exactly.
of the man himself.
Yeah.
Always keeping in mind the caveats that we've discussed. One of the most striking examples of this
Yeah, okay.
is how the table talks portray Hitler's early life,
Mm-hmm.
particularly his time in Vienna.
Right.
Now, in Mein Kampf, Hitler paints a picture of himself
Right.
as a struggling artist,
Mm-hmm.
deeply affected by the poverty and the social ills he witnessed.
Yeah.
And this has contributed to a common image of
Yeah.
a young, idealistic Hitler shaped by the hardships
Yes.
that he endured.
Right. It's a narrative that's been perpetuated in many biographies and
Yeah.
historical accounts.
But you're saying that the table talks offer a different perspective
They do.
on this period of his life.
In the table talks, Hitler downplays the struggles
Oh, wow.
of his Vienna years.
Really?
He even goes so far as to claim that he lived quite comfortably with enough money to buy books and attend the opera,
Wow.
which contradicts not only his own account in Mein Kampf, but also evidence from other sources that corroborate his financial difficulties.
Okay, so if Mein Kampf and independent historical evidence point to a period of genuine struggle,
Mm-hmm.
why would Hitler present a more comfortable
Right.
and less formative experience in the table talks?
That's where the analysis gets really interesting.
Yeah.
It suggests that the table talks might be an attempt by Hitler to revise his personal history, to shape a narrative
Okay.
that better fits the image of a strong and capable leader,
Yeah.
rather than a struggling artist who might be seen as vulnerable or less in control.
So even in these supposedly private conversations,
Yes.
he's still very much aware
Exactly.
of the image he's projecting, crafting a narrative that reinforces his authority and power.
Precisely.
Wow.
It makes you wonder what other aspects of his life and experiences might have been embellished or even fabricated in these table talks.
It reinforces the need to constantly compare these accounts with other sources and to be wary of taking anything at face value.
Exactly.
Okay, so we're seeing a pattern here of potential image-making and self-promotion. Now, what about his political and ideological views? Did the table talks reveal anything particularly surprising or insightful?
Well, they didn't necessarily contradict his known beliefs. But the table talks do provide some intriguing glimpses into how those beliefs manifested in his thinking and shaped his actions. They offer a more nuanced understanding of his motivations and the depth of his convictions.
Could you give us an example of one of these insights?
Sure.
Something that might challenge or expand our understanding of his worldview?
Certainly one striking example is Hitler's discussion of Christianity. In the table talks, he expresses this open disdain for traditional Christian values. He viewed them as weak and incompatible with the strength and ruthlessness that he believed were necessary for a powerful nation.
Interesting.
This starkly contrasts with the image some have tried to portray of Hitler as like a devout Christian leader.
So the table talks suggest that he might have been more pragmatic. Even cynical in his approach to religion, using it as a tool for political gain rather than adhering to its teachings genuinely.
Precisely.
So he was really just using it.
He saw Christianity as something to be manipulated, not embraced, which aligns with his overall personality and worldview. Power was his ultimate goal. And he was willing to use any means necessary to achieve it. Even if it meant exploiting religious sentiment.
That's a disturbing but valuable insight.
It is.
Helping to clarify his motivations and tactics.
Exactly.
Did the table talk shed any light on his views on war and violence?
They certainly did.
Particularly as the tide began to turn against Germany.
And they reinforced the image of a ruthless leader who was convinced of the need for brutal force to achieve his political objectives, even as defeat loomed on the horizon.
Are there any specific conversations or remarks from the table talks that illustrate this point?
One particularly chilling example is his discussion of the planned invasion of the Soviet Union. Operation Barbarossa. Even before the invasion, he spoke with this chilling detachment about the need to completely crush any resistance. Going so far as to advocate for the elimination of entire populations, if necessary, to achieve German dominance.
So even in these informal dinner conversations, he openly expressed his intention to commit genocide. Wow. This isn't strategic military planning.
No.
It's a chilling premeditation of mass murder.
And it underscores the danger of taking anything he said, even in seemingly private settings, at face value, or dismissing it as mere rhetoric. These conversations reveal this frightening glimpse into the depths of his brutality and the unwavering conviction with which he pursued his horrific goals.
That's a sobering reminder that these conversations weren't just idle dinner chatter. They were the breeding ground for some of the most horrific crimes in human history. Knowing what we know now about the unreliability of the table talks, how should we approach their use in historical analysis and understanding?
That's an important question.
Should we disregard them entirely?
And it gets to the heart of how we grapple with flawed historical sources. While we can't treat the table talks as a reliable transcript of Hitler's thoughts, we also can't simply ignore them. They offer a unique, albeit distorted window into his world and the ideas that were circulating within his inner circle.
So it's a matter of approaching them with extreme caution, acknowledging their limitations, while still recognizing their potential to offer insights, however flawed, into Hitler's personality and decision-making process. Think of them as one piece of a very complex and often contradictory puzzle. They shouldn't be used to definitively answer any question about Hitler or his regime. But rather to generate further questions and to critically examine existing narratives. So it's a tool for deeper investigation.
It is.
Prompting us to seek out corroborating evidence, to compare and contrast accounts, and to challenge assumptions that might be based on incomplete or potentially biased information.
Precisely.
The table talks despite their flaws, force us to confront the challenges of historical interpretation, reminding us that we can't simply take sources at face value, especially when dealing with a figure as complex and manipulative as Hitler.
Exactly.
We have to be alert to the possibility of distortion and manipulation, even in seemingly unguarded moments.
Exactly. And there's one more crucial aspect of the table talks we need to discuss.
Okay.
Which is perhaps the most disturbing element of all.
You're talking about his anti-Semitism, aren't you?
Yes.
Okay.
It permeates these conversations.
Right.
Offering a chilling and an unfiltered look at the hatred that fueled his actions.
Even knowing the historical context, I imagine it's difficult.
It is.
To read these accounts without feeling a sense of revulsion.
It is, but confronting these uncomfortable truths is necessary to fully grasp the depths of Hitler's prejudice and how it shaped his policies and ultimately led to the horrors of the Holocaust.
So what form does this anti-Semitism take in the table talks, Jer? Is it just general bigotry?
It's both. We see casual slurs, dehumanizing language, and sweeping generalizations about Jewish people, which reflects the widespread prejudices of that era. But we also see these chilling glimpses of his plans for the final solution, his obsession with eliminating Jews from Europe entirely.
So the table talks provide evidence of his genocidal intentions. Even in these informal settings.
It wasn't just abstract ideology.
It was a concrete plan that he was actively discussing and promoting.
Yes, and this raises complex questions about Hitler's direct role in the Holocaust.
So some historians argue that the table talks provide undeniable proof of his personal involvement in planning and executing the genocide.
They point to specific statements where he outlines his vision for a Jew-free Europe.
Wow.
His approval of brutal methods, and his obsession with racial purity.
So they see the table talks as a smoking gun.
In a sense, yes.
Providing irrefutable evidence of his direct culpability.
However, other historians caution against overinterpreting these conversations. They argue that Hitler often spoke in vague and ambiguous terms, making it difficult to determine the precise extent of his involvement in specific actions and decisions.
So there's still room for debate.
Absolutely.
Even among those who acknowledge the hateful content of these conversations.
While the table talks undoubtedly demonstrate Hitler's profound anti-Semitism and his ultimate goal of eliminating Jews from Europe, they don't necessarily provide a clear-cut answer to the question of how directly he orchestrated each step of the Holocaust. This is a complex historical debate that goes beyond the scope of our discussion today.
It's a reminder that history is rarely black and white. There's always more to uncover. More perspectives to consider, and more nuances to explore.
Precisely. And the table talks, despite their flaws, force us to grapple with these complexities, prompting us to delve deeper into the evidence and to engage in thoughtful and informed discussions about the past. They remind us that historical interpretation is an ongoing process, not a search for simple answers.
Well, that's a lot to consider.
It is.
And it makes me think about the broader implications of these table talks beyond their historical value. What can they teach us about the nature of power, the dangers of unchecked ideology, and the responsibility we all have to critically examine the information we encounter?
That's an excellent point. And it's something we'll explore in more depth in our final part.
Okay, great.
So join us next time as we delve into the broader lessons we can learn from this fascinating and disturbing chapter of history.
Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into Hitler's table talks. And we've spent the last two parts unraveling this pretty tangled web.
We have.
From the questionable origins and the conflicting accounts to these chilling glimpses into Hitler's personality and ideology.
And let's not forget the manipulation and potential for distortion, both during Hitler's lifetime and in the years since. These conversations have been used to shape narratives and influence our understanding of history, despite the serious questions surrounding their authenticity.
It's a lot to absorb. But I think it's important to kind of step back now and consider the bigger picture. So if we kind of move beyond the specifics of who said what and when, what can this entire saga of the table talks teach us?
Well, it's a captivating, albeit unsettling, case study in the power of propaganda and manipulation of history.
Right.
And we can trace this manipulation back to Martin Bormann, Hitler's fiercely loyal secretary.
Right.
His original goal was to create a record of Hitler's supposed genius, to shape his legacy for generations to come.
And it seems like accuracy wasn't his top priority.
No, it wasn't.
He was more concerned with crafting a particular image of Hitler.
Exactly.
Even if it meant filtering, editing, and potentially fabricating information along the way.
That's right.
And it wasn't just Bormann,
No.
both High and Picker. Despite their claims of objectivity, they had their own agendas and biases that colored their accounts. This reinforces a point we've kind of touched on before, which is the difficulty of separating truth from fiction.
Yeah.
Especially when dealing with such a complex and controversial figure.
Right. It makes you realize how easily history can be distorted.
Yeah.
Even when the people involved believe they're being truthful.
Right.
It's not always about deliberate lies.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's about selective memory, unconscious bias,
Yeah.
or simply the desire to present oneself or one's leader in a favorable light.
So it's not always like a malicious intent to deceive.
Right.
Sometimes it's these subtle ways that our perceptions and memories can be shaped by our own beliefs and motivations.
Exactly. And this susceptibility to manipulation isn't limited to the past.
No.
It's a challenge we continue to grapple with today,
Right.
especially in our age of information overload and competing narratives.
It's almost like a cautionary tale.
It is.
Reminding us to be wary of any single source or interpretation of history.
Exactly.
We need to consider the context.
Right.
The motivations and the potential biases at play, just as we've done with these table talks.
Absolutely. And it's especially crucial when dealing with figures of power and authority.
Right.
We need to be critical of how information is presented and question whether it serves a particular agenda or reinforces existing power structures.
So the table talks serve as a stark reminder that we can't simply accept historical narratives at face value.
No, we can't.
We have to dig deeper, seek out multiple perspectives, and engage in critical thinking to arrive at a more nuanced and informed understanding.
That's precisely the lesson we can take away from this deep dive.
So you initially wanted to explore the table talks to gain insights into Hitler's thinking and motivations. Do you feel like we've accomplished that?
I think we have.
Despite the complexities and uncertainties we've uncovered?
Yeah, I definitely feel like we've gained a more nuanced understanding. Even if it's not the clear-cut picture I might have initially expected.
Right. It's a reminder that history,
exactly,
especially when dealing with a figure like Hitler, is rarely straightforward.
Exactly. And it's through that process of grappling with ambiguity and challenging assumptions that we arrive at a more informed and meaningful understanding of the past.
Now, we've talked about the implications for historical interpretation and the need for critical thinking.
Yeah.
But I'm also thinking about the broader lessons we can draw from this saga.
Sure.
What does it tell us about the nature of power?
It's a chilling reminder that even the most monstrous ideologies can be made palatable, even appealing, through careful packaging and propaganda. And this is something Hitler was incredibly adept at doing. He knew how to tap into people's fears, prejudices, and desires using language to manipulate and control.
And the table talks provide a disturbing example of this manipulation in action.
We see how he used these seemingly private conversations to shape perceptions, to normalize his hateful views, to present himself as a visionary leader rather than the tyrant he truly was.
It's a strategy that's been employed throughout history and continues to be used today. The table talks serve as a cautionary tale, reminding us to be vigilant in recognizing and challenging attempts to manipulate our beliefs and perceptions.
It's a call to be critical consumers of information.
Absolutely.
To question the narratives we're presented with and to be wary of those who seek to exploit our fears and prejudices for their own gain.
It's a responsibility we all share.
It's a responsibility we all share.
Absolutely. We need to remember that the seeds of tyranny can be sown in seemingly innocuous settings, even in dinner conversations. It's our responsibility to recognize those seeds, to call them out, and to prevent them from taking root. It's a sobering thought.
It is.
But an essential one.
Yeah, we can't afford to be complacent. Or to assume that the lessons of the past are irrelevant to the present.
By studying history, even its most challenging and disturbing chapters, we gain valuable insights into the human condition and the forces that shape our world.
And hopefully those insights equip us to make more informed decisions, to resist manipulation, and to work towards a more just and equitable future.
Well, on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into Hitler's table talks.
We have.
It's been a journey.
It has.
Through a complex and often unsettling landscape. But hopefully it's left you with a deeper understanding of the past.
Right.
And a renewed commitment to critical thinking and navigating the present.
Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.
Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged.